Well, on behalf of the House Democratic Caucus, I want to thank the members of the press who are here this afternoon. Our caucus for the last, since session began, we have been sort of echoing a call to fundamentally increase funding for the core functions of government. The last 5 years have been devastating for what we believe are the important functions of the state of Oklahoma, educating our children and protecting our citizens. A few weeks ago, our caucus came together with educators and superintendents from around the state and asked that the governor and legislative leaders put the talk of a tax cut on hold, and instead of cutting the income taxes $120 million, use some of those resources to invest in our children. Well, today, we're joining together again with members of our caucus as well as members from the public safety community, members from the Department of Corrections and state troopers, retired folks and active folks who are all coming together to join with us to say it is also time to put off income tax cuts that will cost the state over $120 million, and instead let's invest in public safety. And it's important because the last 5 years in terms of public safety have been very, very difficult. As it pertains to just the Department of Public Safety, our state troopers, we've seen nearly a $10 million cut in the last 5 years. The Department of Corrections has sustained nearly a $23 million cut over the last 5 years. And at a time when public safety is vitally important, we think to offer up a tax cut that equates to $39 per person per year is foolhardy. And instead, we need to invest in protecting our citizens, and no one does that better than some of the members who are here.
Reduced revenues will continue to plague the Department of Corrections, and it will put forth the salaries that are going to be too low for us to keep our employees from going to the oil patch. It'll also cause us to continue a dangerous practice at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, which is our maximum security prison, and that is the practice of holding our employees hostage and requiring them to work double shifts. And how this works is that at the end of one shift, those employees cannot leave until other employees come in. If an employee does not come in for some reason, then that employee has to work a double shift. We're talking about 8-hour shifts. We're talking about very highly stressful jobs. And you know, this is not only dangerous to the employees, but it's also dangerous to the public. The low salaries are not the only problems that we have with the Department of Corrections. The employment at these facilities are around 70%. And just about a week ago, I had one of my clients come in my animal hospital who works for the Department of Corrections, and he told me, he said, you know, we have a large percentage of the present employees at both OSP and Jackie Brannon that are eligible for retirement. And if all the employees decided that they wanted to retire right now, it would put OSP and Jackie Brannon to where they would almost be out of commission.
I have 2 correctional facilities within my district, and I have 2 additional correctional facilities within 5 miles of my district. So this is a very important issue to me. Representative Renegar is just discussing with you the impact of inadequate staffing at the different correctional institutions. I'd like to talk about how staffing levels are directly connected with salaries, and which is an issue that the House could have addressed last week before last, with House Bill 2146, which would have raised the starting salary of a correction employee from $11.83 an hour to $14 an hour. Now some of you may be thinking, well, you know, $11.83, let's put that into perspective. Starting salary at a DOC officer is $11.83 an hour, like I said. When you do the math, that's approximately $473.20 a week, approximately, for a 40-hour week, or $1,892 a month, $22,713 a year. If you have a family of 4 on that salary, they qualify for food stamps. Coming from a field of education, 30-year education, their children, 85% of the correctional officers' children qualify for free and reduced lunches. And I think that I always tell my constituents, that's kind of a bar we should set, that I don't like going below that bar so that they qualify for those programs. They're great programs, but the state of Oklahoma needs to reward their employees. These positions are vital to Oklahoma's security. At OSP, we're guarding the hardest criminals in the state. Yet, we're asking these workers to live near poverty. We ask that we restore funding to the Department of Corrections so that these workers can provide for themselves and their families and strengthen Oklahoma's public safety.
Right now, I have 80 correctional officers that can fill a post. I'm authorized to have 132, and my budget allows for 102. But with the starting salaries and the competition in the workplace right now, we are only able to fill that number of positions. The cell blocks at my facility house 160 offenders. There is one correctional officer assigned to each one of those cell blocks. It is a very dangerous environment, and I'm very proud of the men and women that fill those roles every day on a daily basis, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Myself, I'm in my 29th year with the Oklahoma Department of Corrections. I've worked in 7 of the state institutions and 1 community correction center. And they're right, this is not just isolated to my area. It is a statewide issue, and it affects the state of Oklahoma as a whole.
My name is Lieutenant Dooley. I work at Joseph Harp Correctional Center. I'm today speaking on behalf of the Oklahoma Correctional Professionals. We, the employees of the Department of Corrections, are at a breaking point. Budget cuts have put so much pressure to do much more with much less year after year. We cannot go any further without any help from the legislature. There are now under 4,000 employees in the DOC. In the last 23 years, it has been 23 years since the agency had that few number, and inmates back in 1990 was 12,000. Today, there are nearly double that. We have lost more than 850 employees in the last 5 years due to budget cuts. We are working mandatory double shifts at nearly every facility. Some are working 4 double shifts per week. And even when it isn't mandatory, we have officers that feel that they're being threatened if they don't stay. Of course, officers enjoyed their overtime on their paychecks for a while. But now they just want to go home to their families and they can't get there. Officers working this many hours don't make good choices. They're not able to respond effectively and efficiently to problems that occur. And this is a huge public safety issue. The job is becoming more and more dangerous. It was just 2 weeks ago that we had serious incidents involving several offenders at the Lexington Assessment Reception Center, where 4 officers were injured and several inmates went to the hospital. Also at Bill Johnson Correctional Center, they also had a large group disruption. I worked at Bill Johnson for almost 10 years, and in the 18 years it's been open, that's the largest group disruption they've ever had. This will only escalate as fewer officers or more overworked and exhausted officers work these posts. Our pay is inadequate to attract and maintain staffing, and that is why we are here today asking for a raise and the funding to do it. 30% of DOC employees qualify for food stamps. Oklahoma can do better than that. Lest we forget, our agency was one of only 4 state agencies forced to furlough employees 2 years ago. It cost the average correctional employee $1,400 for the year. For low-paid workers like myself and these other gentlemen, it's a huge sacrifice. We did this for the benefit of the state in lean budget years. But now we are here asking legislature in good budget years to recognize our sacrifice and our valuable service and give us some relief.
As many of you know, I had 2 correctional institutions in my house district, one at McLeod, one at Stringtown. I tried the entire 12 years I was here to try to improve the condition in the Department of Corrections. We've had a bad habit here in Oklahoma that we want to throw away the key, lock everybody up, but we're not willing to pay for it. The turnover, as every one of these guys from corrections have said, is tremendous. They can't keep people hard. probably, these guys are here because they were like me, they were there so long they can't afford to go anywhere else now. But I want to talk about DPS. When I first told Chief Adams and former Commissioner Bob Ricks I was going to run for state representative, I always remember what Bob Ricks told me. He said, Trooper Roan, don't forget where you came from. And I've tried to be a voice for law enforcement. I spent 30 years in law enforcement. I tried to be their voice here at the Capitol for 12 years. The last raise that I'm aware of that any state employee got was in 2006 when there was a statewide raise for all state employees. That's 7 years ago. It's time to give the troopers a pay raise. They're getting harder and harder to recruit. I'll give you an idea of how bad it is. We as a legislature authorized 925 employees for DPS for troopers. They have 768. They have, of that 768, they've got 4 that are going to retire by the end of April, and they have 211 more that have, as I used to tell the chief, they get up this morning and have a bad hair day, they could call headquarters and say, I'm retiring at the end of the month. So take 215 from that 768, that puts you down to about a little over 550 troopers to cover 77 counties. Folks, that's just not taking care of the people that are using our roads, who depend upon the troopers to protect them, to respond to accidents, to do motorist assist, and all of that. I tell you how bad it's got in the 12 years since I came up here. When I retired, before I retired, there were 4 troopers in Johnston County, my home county. Today there's 1. And many times he's covering either 2 or 3 counties. And that's that way all the way across this state, especially in the rural areas. It's time that we quit worrying about giving, I don't remember the figure Scott just gave you, the $39. I'll give my $39 back anytime to ensure that the motoring public and the people of Oklahoma have enough troopers to cover this state and to provide public safety that they're required to do. And they do a heck of a job considering the shortage they're under.
I am retired. This July I will have been retired 7 years, but I put in 38 of the 75 years the history of the Department of Public Safety is. During that time, you can't help but become heavily enthralled and become part of it. Live, breathe. Truly it said if you could cut open a trooper's veins, he would bleed brown for the brown shirts that we wear. When I left and when I was chief, which is 2006, we were running about 824 troopers. And now that I'm retired, I'm realizing the seriousness of the organization. The state is with a balanced budget program, and I think that's a great idea. And everyone gave to make the budgets come to pass, particularly the Department of Public Safety. Now, I speak only as a retiree. I'm not active in any way. But I want you to know to give up $10 million out of your budget is rather significant. But yet we've had increases in another number of motor vehicles. We see the number of increases in the road miles that are being increased. And the population, we're even seeing great things happening even with our sports world today. So with that, in comes increased numbers. The troopers today are just as Paul had mentioned. 2006 was the last time the states received a pay increase. Well, whenever a trooper gets a pay raise, it trickles down to the retirees, many of us, in that the troopers, whatever they get, the retirees get a percentage of it as well. You don't have to really go very far to talk to any of us that are retired to realize things are pretty serious. within the last 6 years, what I'm beginning to see and realize, and I keep numbers on it, 26.7% increase to live. What this has done to me at my personal level, I've had to give up many things, particularly driving. Because being a trooper, I like to drive. Well, I don't get to do that now that I'm retired, but whenever I see the price at the pump, but also on all the groceries. Have you noticed the price of food? Now, these are things that sustain life. But I tell you this, the troopers are so loyal and dedicated. They live, they breathe, they eat the Oklahoma Highway Patrol. And I will tell you this, they are doing everything they can to survive. As the chief of the patrol, the 22nd, what I was required to do was to give way to allowing them to work extra jobs to moonlight, not in uniform, but to work so that they could bring extra income in so they could sustain life. And they're doing that. But the consequences, we're hitting a point now then where they're so tired that they don't feel like they're as sharp or able to work. So it's critical. As I was at the National Monument dedication many years ago for fallen officers in the line of duty, it was said by one of the keynote speakers that our society has a very fine blue line that separates us from total anarchy and a civilization. And that blue fine line is law enforcement, the policemakers.